Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Evening Talks here on TVP World. I'm Anna Kalczyńska. Welcome. 1,000th day of Russia's atrocious war and its full-scale aggression against Ukraine brings no peace in sight. 2.5 years since the invasion, the Ukrainian defenders stand unwavering in their determination, yet with less and less certainty as to the outcome of the war. Joining me in trying to assess the situation of Ukraine today and the efforts of the West regarding the military and financial support is Benjamin Tallis, Director, Democratic Strategy Initiative, also a co-author of an open letter listing 5-point approach to help develop Ukraine defense capacities. Thank you for your time, Benjamin. Hello.
Hello, Anna. Nice to be back on the show with you.
There's been no confirmation from the US as to granting the permission for the use of ATACMS missiles in Russia. Would you think that it would be possible for Ukraine to attack Russia without the US approval? Would it be a possibility that the West has lost its grip on Ukraine?
No, I don't think so. Nothing in the way that Ukraine has conducted the war when it's been using Western weapons has suggested that it's gone off-piste or ignored the instructions of its Western partners. When we've seen Ukraine strike deeper into Russia, it's been with its own manufactured weapons. So I am confident that Ukraine is continuing to use the weapons in the manner directed by its partners. But let's be clear, those limits that are being put on are ridiculous at this point. They are tying Ukraine's hands behind its back and making the West look weak, not weakening Russia, which is what they should be doing.
So Ukraine lost time. What impact can this use of this power inside Russia have actually on the war theater right now?
Well, we've already seen in the Bryansk region taking out a high-value target, a big ammo dump there, and it's the ATACMS missiles are useful. They're a bigger version of the HIMARS missile and can hit bigger targets from further away. Like any precision strike weapon, they're extremely useful for taking out these high-value targets, being they command and control, supply and logistics hubs, or even leadership-type targets, so hitting the generals who are running Russia's operations. But the restrictions that are being put on them are still too severe. There's only still a limited area in which Ukraine can use these weapons, and there's frankly not enough of them, nor are they the highest quality weapons in the US arsenal, which would make a real difference to Ukraine's war effort.
All right, let's turn now to Kremlin, who, with Putin today approving a new nuclear doctrine, warning of an inevitability of retaliation. On the other hand, Mark Rutte says we should all talk less about the use of Western weapons in Russia. So my question to you would be, how should we treat words by Vladimir Putin like these? I mean, is it really a serious threat that we should consider as such, or simply a rhetoric that is just once again reiterated?
It's the latter. I mean, this is just more rhetorical signaling, hoping to play on the fear in certain Western countries, not least in Germany and the US, where fear has been proven to be one of the drivers of decision-making, and so-called escalation management has been a driver of decision-making for the governments in both Washington and Berlin. It's important that no one is saying, and I'm certainly not saying, that nuclear weapons are not a serious business. They are. They should be treated deadly seriously. But that's precisely what the Kremlin is not doing. They are using them as a toy in this rhetorical game. The Kremlin knows full well that we have, as NATO, both within Europe and in the US, full capacity to respond in kind to any nuclear strike. And if they were to actually up the nuclear ante, they would be bringing destruction upon themselves. So what they're playing on is fear, trying to once again rattle the nuclear saber, and we really shouldn't let that worry us. We shouldn't let that put red lines around our actions. What we should be doing is focusing on defeating and deterring Russia in future.
All right, so we reflected on what has happened so far, 1,000 days of relentless war. But many things can be said about the war in Ukraine, but not that we haven't been warned. Russia had been preparing itself and the world for the assault for months and years. Today, the situation seems quite different and unpredictable, with Donald Trump taking the office next year and a possibility of changing the stance on Ukraine. So how can we fill in for the missing ally if we can treat US as such?
Well, we don't know what's going to happen with Donald Trump. And this is precisely the problem that is weighing on the minds of many Europeans and I'm sure Canadian allies as well. And the point here is that rather than actually watching, waiting and worrying, we should be acting. There's enough material, there's enough economic might in Europe and in Canada that if we acted together as a coalition, we could more than secure Ukraine. We could defeat Russia and deter it from attacking us in future. It's not to say that Europe could replace everything the US does. It couldn't. It doesn't have all those capabilities, but it has more than enough to actually ensure Ukraine would win if we play this to our advantage. And that was the point of the letter that we put together with a really stellar group of leading politicians, military leaders, and top experts from around the world in order to make that point and to present 5 clear steps that a coalition of the willing could actually take, as well as should take, things they can do that would put us on the front foot and could end up checkmating Russia.
I read actually your high-profile open letter calling on Canada and Europe to secure Ukraine. But do you really believe there's a chance for a strong push and a united, single-minded policy towards Ukraine?
Well, actually, the point is it's not a united, single-minded policy. Unity doesn't serve us well when it's unity at the lowest common denominator. If it's unity around the position of Warsaw or Tallinn, then great. If it's unity around the position of Berlin, not so much. It's not what we need right now. And so this letter is actually encouraging a vanguard of the forward-leaning states. Interesting to note that it was Donald Tusk who actually came out publicly and said that there should be a coalition of the willing who shouldn't move at the speed of the slowest, but should actually move at the speed of need and the speed of relevance for Europe to secure Ukraine and to stand up for ourselves. So this is about allowing those who can to do, rather than being stopped by those who either through bad faith or bad judgment don't get it yet. And if they actually move ahead, I think there's every chance they could do this. There is a question of political will. And people always talk about political will, but they don't talk so much about where political will actually comes from. It can come from moral conviction, it can come from a clear understanding of interests, or it can come through strategy, which provides that immaterial infrastructure of courage to actually move forward. Because what strategy does is make seemingly unsolvable challenges into manageable, solvable problems. And part of that solving those problems is laying out clear steps to take, laying out proximate objectives along the way to try and reach. And that's what we've tried to do, to say, here are 5 clear things. So to arm Ukraine to win, number 1. Number 2, to seize all the Russian assets to pay for this. Number 3, to extend air defense over Western Ukraine and to put ground troops in to do non-combat tasks, as proposed by Emmanuel Macron. 4, to extend real security guarantees to Ukraine in the interim between now and when it can join NATO. And 5, to stand up for ourselves, to spend properly on defense, as Poland and the Baltic states are doing, and to use our economic might to actually turn the screws on Russia and destroy it economically.
You see, as to assessing whether Europe is eager to act commonly, one must just observe the developments, and these are really dynamic. I mean, if you consider the last development, meaning granting approval to Ukraine to use the ATACMS inside Russia, you see that Italy, for instance, or other countries decline to grant this approval, like Germany. And other countries are more than willing for Ukraine to use them. So that would be the first difference, right?
Yes. Excuse me. Absolutely. That shows the difference. And it also shows the need for those who do want to actually do this to go ahead and not be bound by the pace of the slowest. So, and I think there is that realization that if we don't get this right, then we're in big trouble. That realization certainly echoes around Central Eastern Europe, around Northern Europe. I think it's something that Ursula von der Leyen and Andrius Kubilius, the new defense commissioner in the EU, understand. And so we have to find a way to actually help those coalition of the like-minded to get together around common steps they can take.
All right, Benjamin, fingers crossed for that. And now, if you allow me, the war between the East and the West takes place not only in Ukraine, but Georgia is another part of the puzzle, and could constitute a potential problem for Moscow. So with the ongoing opposition protests and today's arrests, how can the situation evolve, according to you?
Well, we should be watching it closely because indeed this is another front in that same fight for freedom and against tyranny. And I think what we're seeing in Georgia is the chickens coming home to roost of poor EU neighborhood policy that failed in the past to reckon with the threat from Russia and to understand that we are truly in a systemic competition between democracies and autocracies in our neighborhood, as well as at home in Ukraine and in our streets where we're fighting against a hybrid war, against subversion and destabilization. And failing to treat that seriously as the systemic competition it is led to an underpowered policy, led to a vicious rather than a virtuous cycle. And we frankly let the Georgian people down. On occasion, we could argue that they haven't always made the right choices. But now is the time to really step up our support to Georgia because we need to see that actually they have a home in the democratic world and that we can provide them with a path to it. Now, as you can see from the images on the screen right now, many Georgians are out on the street fighting with their bodies, with their souls and their hearts for that future. It would be both callous, morally wrong, and also against our interest if we didn't step up and actually support that. So there's a serious question about how we tie our neighborhood strategy into our wider strategy for winning this systemic competition against authoritarians.
Thank you very much, Benjamin Tallis, for your insights, expertise, and for your time tonight. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Great to be with you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
And that completes this edition of Evening Talks, but please do stay with us as news continue on TVP World. Thank you for watching.